Um, and thank everybody for being here tonight. It's great to see you all here for this talk with Jolie. I think
Thank you, Paul.
I'm very excited to have her work in the gallery. We've talked about this for at least
years.
Since I started here.
Yes.
But I got to know Jolie when I first moved here 7 years ago, and we met at a party, and I'm like, I need to come see your studio. And ever since, I've been very envious of her work.
Well, thank you.
I am not an abstract painter, so abstract painting always to me intrigues me for many reasons that we can get into. So I'm eager to talk to you about that and your inspirations and how you enter a piece and just your language as it evolves over the course of working on something. For those of you who don't know, Jolie is an abstract expressionist and who's from Cincinnati, who uncovers chance patterns and visual phenomenons found in the natural world, very influenced by music and nature.
True.
I believe you told me at one time your dad was really into jazz, and he took you to a lot of jazz music, so
I grew up on jazz.
So I'm really curious about how that informs your work. You studied at the California Center for Design in Milwaukee.
No,
No.
California. Close. Costa Mesa.
The Art
Costa
Academy
Mesa.
of Cincinnati in California, and the Boca Raton Museum of Art in Florida.
Right. Random.
And your work's been shown in solo, group shows throughout the U.S., and you're collected internationally. So, no shade on you.
Yeah.
This is just from your artist statement that your work channels pure emotion directly from your heart through your hands and onto the canvas. And you weave a complex tapestry of materials built layer upon layer with materials such as hand-painted papers, acrylic paints, gels, and molding paste, to name a few.
Well, yeah.
So,
True.
Is any of that true?
That's all true. Every bit of it.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
And some of those words were said by others, and over the years, the artist statement keeps evolving and changing, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to put together
is.
and
Very,
land on. And
Very. I find it really hard to talk about myself and my work.
yeah,
I mean, I don't mind talking about myself when I'm talking about other stuff, but
well,
yeah.
maybe we can get you to do that a little bit here today.
I shall do it. I know I can.
Part of this has really become a fun thing to do with these shows because I learn a lot about the artists I show. We were talking about this after the opening. As I put a show together and we hang it, I'm concerned with sort of the macro view of it and just how does everything work. And then I get people who come in and say, did you notice that one detail about that one painting? And so through the course of having other people observe it and come in to see the show, and then I get to spend time with the work myself when I'm manning the gallery, I get to go deeper into it through all these other people's eyes. And this piece here, which is called Maelstrom, was a piece that many people commented on, the different layers and, there's architectural diagrams in there, there's newspaper, there's Japanese calligraphy. It's very layered and it's got a great composition to it. So I'm sort of curious about how you got here. If you could just talk about how your journey to becoming an artist, because I know you've had various iterations of Jolie over the years, and sort of wondering what point did you start doing art? Where was the sort of genesis of being an artist for you?
I think I started doing art when I was 3 or 4 years old, but it certainly wasn't an interest that peaked and kept going all my life. It just kept coming in and out and reintroducing itself. But my grandmother was born in 1915. I spent lots of time with her, and she was really, really good at art. And she went to the Art Academy, which for that time was very, big deal and wonderful thing. So she was, I have her portfolio still from the Art Academy, which is really nice to have. And so I love that. But then you start getting interested in other things as life goes on. And I studied dance, I studied theater, and I got really involved in theater in my late teens and 20s. Did a lot of theater. And then real life started happening. So to jump forward, probably, and all along my life, I knew I could just draw and do things. So I would make signs for different events, and nothing, any big deal. And occasionally I would sketch and paint a little bit in a book. But I was always, doing all my jobs and other fun things. And I always loved music. And my dad did take me to jazz clubs when I was his date when he was divorcing my mom. At 16, I'd get to go to jazz clubs, and I thought it was just so phenomenal. So, and it was really phenomenal. And I relate jazz kind of to abstract art because it's all kind of random and it's all a feeling. You can kind of go off on your own and then come back and push and pull, and all of this seems to me that I get in the best place when I'm kind of in a subliminal state, or I'm not really thinking anymore, or I'm not thinking about anything else but being in the work. But in about 2001, my dad bought myself a workshop in Provence for a painting workshop, and gifted his sister, my aunt, also the same thing. So we went on this trip together, and it was painting watercolors in beautiful hillsides and cemeteries and old places, and I loved every bit about it. It'd make a great little movie because my aunt was really stubborn and hard of hearing and wanted to run everything that we were doing all the time, but she couldn't hear and couldn't speak French, and it was kind of funny. But we got through that, and it energized me toward thinking, I really want to paint. So I started painting in my basement. I was selling real estate at the time, and just painting here and there. And I met some other people that were artists and kind of got encouragement from them. But finally, when I moved downtown and decided not to continue selling real estate, I got a studio at Pendleton and started painting more seriously. So that's kind of how it started.
But there were some steps along the way as well.
Oh,
in
yeah.
between, the real estate and
Yeah.
your grandma. I mean,
Oh, I know.
I mean, I know you worked in the restaurant business for a while. You were in marketing.
Oh, well, my career path was, I told Paul, I changed my career I think I lose interest in things after about 7 years, or 7 to 10 years. I totally change everything. But of course, I wanted to do theater, but it's not very practical unless you leave Cincinnati. And some boyfriend kept me from doing that. So my father, I worked for John Ruthven and in art sales for several years, but the guy that ran his sales company, so I got the opportunity at 20 to 22 years old going to art fairs and art galleries all over the country, really being the Girl Friday that set everything up and made all the arrangements. And it's phenomenal when I think back on that, how much what was given to me to do and be responsible for at that age. Through our discussion of all these other things, it's kind of like I say, well, I don't know anything about that, but I can do it. I'll figure it out. So that was great, but I was never making much money, but having a great experience. Then I decided I wanted to go somewhere and make more money, and I tried to get a job as a waitress, because all my friends making money as waitresses were making more money than I was. So I got there, and they said, well, we don't really need another waitress, but we see you have bookkeeping experience, so we need an office manager. So I did that, and then I learned gradually to do just about every aspect in the restaurant, and I ended up being the manager. That restaurant sent me to Florida to be a restaurant manager, and I always loved the part. It was, I like energy, I like challenges, and it was definitely a challenge, and lots of fun. Should I go through my whole thing?
Well,
It'll take too long.
No. I mean, as it goes in, I mean, you went into there, and somehow you end up owning a retail store here in Cincinnati called Jolie.
Yes, well, that evolved too, because when the restaurant in Florida was sold, and I decided to come back to Cincinnati at the urging of my father, wanting me to come and work for his company, which manufactured brazing, soldering, and welding alloys, metals. And I said, oh, I just want to do something creative. I wanted to get into marketing or advertising. And he made me his advertising manager, which, okay, fine. So then how can I make this product that is not very interesting more interesting? And he was all on board with the idea that you make yourself stand out from everybody else. It's a product that other people make, but not a lot of people. And to put yourself above the others, it's like you've got to do something different. So our metals were the cleanest, most polished that anyone's could be, bright, shiny. So I set some table up with mirrored, blue mirrored surface and photographed all the metals like it was jewelry and had, pinpoint spots and fun stuff. And then we made our packaging super interesting. But along that way, I think my dad really was interested in me going further in the company, and I ended up going to California, managing sales warehouse and shipping office there for about 6 years. Going through all that was great and challenging, and I really did enjoy a lot of it, but being in a man's world and a non-creative world and always getting flack from, I'm still a young woman, I'm only 31 years old, and men that have been in the industry for 25 years and they're all the good old boy network didn't go so well. Or, it was always challenging to try to not have a problem. Yeah, I got into a golf tournament. I never had played golf before. But I wasn't going to drive the golf cart to deliver beverages. I said, no, I'm playing. So,
How'd you do?
terrible. Nobody cared.
They didn't know if you were like some savant or something like that.
I did take some lessons first, but, I just wanted to not be totally embarrassed. But
Yeah.
it was one of those things where whatever the best ball is, that's what counts or something. So
Yeah.
after, yeah, scramble.
The scramble? Scrabble?
Scramble.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't win.
But you had fun.
I had fun.
Yeah.
So then from that, I told my dad I was going to quit, and I didn't want to leave California. So I went to the design school I was going to really was more about interior design, which is where I thought I could go to be creative. And I wanted to have my own business. Anything I'd ever done, I was working for myself. So I didn't want to change that to ever, have a boss. I was just lucky to not have a direct boss with me most of the time. And so I took a chance and had to beg for a job in even an office because I didn't have any experience, but I was going to school. And a lot of people didn't want to hire me in a lower level position because I had too much work experience, and they wanted me to be able to stay in that position. So I started painting t-shirts, which was kind of a big thing at that time, hand-painted clothing, and on the side. And then I quit my job and focused on that. I was then making, I just beat the streets, and I painted my one-bedroom apartment on the bed and pulled things out. And I went to the garment district and found things to paint, and then outfits, jackets and jeans and everything. I went around the boutiques and had several accounts, and I got into Nordstrom, which was amazing, really. I just kept pestering them, and they bought some stuff. So then I decided I wasn't sure I really wanted to stay in California. I was kind of lonely. I missed my true friends and family. It's kind of hard to really make close friends in Southern California, as you might imagine. So I came back here and started Jolie, which was a small shop of just hand-painted clothing and custom-made designs in Mount Adams. And I supplemented that with jewelry and other things made by artists that I knew, either here or even back from California. And eventually went downtown, and the boutique there really kind of did great for a few years. I went to Kenwood Town Center, then it became not fun anymore because it was all, too many employees, lots of problems, and keeping track of the inventory, and just like, no, that's not what I want to do. So.
But it's interesting. I mean, you're.
Yes, please.
Question, so was that the beginning of your abstract approach to work? Or?
Not really, no,
What were you
no. The things that I would paint, honestly, was kind of really just very basic designs of, like sailboats and little, pool things related to the sea, stars and little diamond things with, paints and I'd make my own stencils and kind of could repeat the same design, fish, anything. I came up with all kinds of stuff, flowers. And I found when I came back to Cincinnati, no one would pay what they would pay in California. And so I made them less elaborate and less expensive and sold directly instead of going through the shops. Shops loved them, but they wanted them to be half the price. And so, I don't know, this feels like the story's going the wrong direction.
Well, no, I
but
think
well,
it's like, it's an introduction to painting at sort
It's
of
just
at
as my
a
life's
professional
been
level.
very, you
What
know,
year is this that you came back to Cincinnati and was doing this?
1989. So in Mount Adams, those years were the most fun, really fun. I didn't make much money, but I had a lot of fun. And Pat Barry, if you remember him at all from the Weatherman, Pat would come in all the time, and I ended up painting ties for him with different weather forecasts. I painted over 50 ties for Pat. He'd call me and say, I need 2 partly cloudies, one sunny, and a rain. And I kept trying to change it a little bit, put some stuff on it. It was just really fun.
That's hilarious.
But I connected a lot with other, with the art museum and the opera and ballet just by fundraisers and volunteering to do things with them, so they got to know me, and that helped my business a lot. And when I moved downtown, all those people were just kind of coming through when Tower Place was brand new and I was in the arcade, which I think was the nicer place to be. And it was just so great, and I think that helped me a lot in life after that. At some point, I could have gone on to Hyde Park Square or something, but I just realized that it was never going to be a really profitable business. I would work really hard, work a lot of hours, and maybe do okay, but I started selling real estate because it was a practical thing to do, and I was able to do it pretty well for 10 years. But then I started the painting on the side, moved downtown, and was able to do it, so I did. And then, you know, I always will step into like inspiration from my life was, you know, like my dad and mother both were always very interested only in very modern, abstract kinds of living styles and their art. So not that they knew a lot about art or talked about art, but all the art they had was like bought at Clausen's or some nice place, contemporary galleries, and I still have some of their art that is my most precious stuff. That it's just not even, you know, like a reclining figure, but it's so abstract you can hardly tell what it is. Really heavy-duty, thick paint just globbed on the canvas. So I was always really, you know, intrigued by that. And my dad later on bought a bunch of Jack Meanwell paintings, some really large ones, in his house that he built later. And that paint, just looking at the thickness and the depth and just how, wow, you make this really cool thing, and just slamming the paint on. And I also always liked, you know, as you grow up as a young girl or whatever, you're seeing things and you learn a little bit in school, but I never really studied anything seriously, and I didn't go to college at all. And I taught myself a lot of things, and took courses here and there, but, you know, it was all random. But when I started going to museums and seeing these things that I'd heard about in person, I was like floored by what they really looked like especially Van Gogh. I was like, oh my God, you know, the paint and the little chunks and, you know, pieces of the paint were just unbelievable. That's what made it even more special than it looked just on a, you know, printed piece of paper. So that all fascinated me. So when I started to paint, I really was trying to paint a lot like Jack Meanwell, just in using heavy strokes and lots of texture, and never was trying to be him or do what he did, but use that kind of movement and that kind of work. And in my earlier work, you would see that, but I would say none of that's here, really. That piece is the earliest piece here. That might have been about 2009 or 8, something like that. But that interests me because when I see that, and I've gone in a lot of different directions, and then we put all this work together, and it was interesting to me that it fit still, even though many years later, some of those original marks and things that I made are still there. in even when they're really complex. You just see it. It's kind of your language. It becomes your language.
It's interesting, those through lines. I mean, you've got the art piece has been a through line all the way since you were a little girl. I mean, it's always been there in various different forms. So you're a little bit more than 10 years into this.
Yeah, true.
So I'm curious where it goes to next.
I know, me too. Me too.
The Jack Meanwell, he's got great energy.
Yes.
It just really feels like it's just very visceral and very spontaneously done, and so there's great energy. Your work seems more considered than that.
More considered?
Yeah, in terms of it feels to me that especially a number of pieces feels like there's I know you talk about not having formal training, but a number of these pieces to me have very formal compositional elements to them, where there's this really wonderful sense of dynamic asymmetry that's happening, the use of, just color to sort of do this, spot of color is as important as the rest of the piece, and really holds the canvas in a way and really creates this tension and dynamic quality to it. All those things being, things, like if you go to design school or painting school, you're being talked about, taught, and that's a part of it. So you were picking that up sort of through osmosis by looking at it. And I know you mentioned a couple other people, Pearl Schwartz and Cedric Chang, and whose work, a little bit of research I've done on that, I think has a lot of, there's something about it that I can feel its influence on you.
It's just very minimal, usually, and very faint collage is used in his paint. It's just has this more, this part is that kind of feeling, but the little bits of paper and things, his work is kind of like that. But that was a painting in my parents' home that I always loved, and it almost, if you're looking back, it just looks like a very pale green painting with a little bit of variation, but it's the color. And I didn't realize even until much later that they're actually ships or boats that are just very subtle. And that was purchased at Clausen's Art Gallery when Phyllis Weston was the, guru of art.
I'm a designer, and we had a client who wrote a letter to us one time about a piece of work we had done and complimented us on the awesome power of restraint we had exercised in designing this piece. And I've never forgotten that line. And Cedric's work feels like it's doing that. It's like there's a lot there, but there's also like that whole idea of like, when there's nothing left to take away, and in finding that place. I'm always curious, the question I always ask of people, because it's always asked me, is like, how do you know when a piece is done? And I think that's interesting within the context of like the last couple shows I've had, which have been sort of more direct observational, and where like you can see that they might come to a conclusion. The figures are painted, the scene is done, and it's like, okay. And it's a process to get there, but there is a point where you have to move on. Abstract's a little bit different. It's like you were working on one of these pieces
the day of the show.
The day we hung it. So it wasn't quite done for you yet. And
a lot of times.
So two questions: how do you know when a piece is done, and is anything here finished for you?
Maybe not. It's like that. You just know, basically, is an easy answer, but it's kind of like, just keep working on it, layers and layers. It's always important. I start very randomly, and I don't even have a plan at all, pretty much. Just, I might pick 2 colors that I want to work with, and then that changes too. I start with 2 and darks and lights of that, but I'm just playing almost. And when you play, you're free, and you can see that it's free, and it's not like really calculated movements. And you can always, if something just doesn't look balanced or right, you can fix it or change it or morph it. And that's another beauty of abstract paint, that it dries acrylic paint. It dries fairly quickly. You can do things to extend the drying time, and other things to the paint to make it more fluid or more, not so fluid, a little bit shiny or thicker, and you just play with all those materials and kind of learn what they do. With things being finished, sometimes something comes really easy and it just works and keeps working and it's done. Other stuff, I'm trying to think of that painting is a really good example, because that one I did when I was at a workshop in Austin, Texas, and I liked it, but I wasn't sure it was finished. And then I started messing with it, and then I totally messed it up. And then I really messed it up. And then I thought, I don't care anymore what I do to it, so I put color all over it and got really horrible. And then I painted some more layers on it, and that's what I ended up with. But that one just forever, until I was sort of pretty happy with it. Others, it's just a process. And sometimes I'll feel like, something's not quite right. Just sit it down, let it sit there even a month, and I'm working on other things, and it's just sitting there, and I keep noticing things about it, even, subliminally go, oh. I might go over and just do one or two little things and then walk away and not touch it again for another week. It's all random. And the painting back there that's green and peach colors, I really thought I had a lot more to do with that. And I stopped and didn't get back to it. And then I decided, I kind of like it just the way it is, without overthinking and overdoing. And I also kind of feel like the one that's lots of pinks and purples and a little bit of green.
Pandemonium?
No, the one in the middle that's a little smaller. That's called Monkberry Moon. If you know the Beatles well, that's where that came from. It's more of an obscure Beatles name of a song. But I am not so sure I'm happy with that completely. It's like the one next to it on the right has more big spaces and the smaller strokes. There seems like maybe there's too much busyness in that. But again, maybe not.
Kathy, you had a question.
Do you work on several pieces at once, or do you concentrate on just one piece?
Usually a couple at a time.
A couple at a time?
Yeah. Might have one on the side, and I get impatient. I always want to try something new, so doing a real series, I'm not, I don't have, if my series might be like 3, 2 or 3 pieces. I could do that more, but,
Curious about, emotion as in trying to, is there, in the word expressionism, within abstract expressionism, and do some of them come out of a feeling more like, there's a couple red ones up there, and if we get real cliche, is red anger, is blue tranquility, is white the absence of it, are there are things that you're like going, I'm going to move into this piece and I feel this, and I feel,
I think somewhat, but it's not like, oh, I'm sad today or I'm mad today, so I'm going to do this. It just comes out. And I notice when I'm listening to music, if the painting's not going well and I change the music, that helps me a lot. It starts going another way or feeling a different way. And also, every artist says this, I'm constantly turning the piece to see how it looks upside down or sideways. And then sometimes even decide I change the orientation based on how it evolves. But that helps you see if it looks balanced from any direction. Feels like it's a good painting.
So there's a painting up front. I think it's Wildfire, and Bonnie pointed out that she goes, "Is this hung upside down?" Because the signature is upside down in the upper left-hand corner, and I thought the same thing when I received the art and hung it because the hooks were up there. And
well, she was kind of right. That's because I changed my mind at some point and I forgot to fix the signature. But that was one of those ones where I really was having a hard time deciding up or down, up or down. And sometimes when you're working with a gallery too, and I'm not so, much of a fussy artist to say, if you like it the other way around, that's fine. I'll just change my signature. I'm not, I'm not Picasso. I'm not going to throw a fit. Well, I don't yell at myself. because everybody else does that. No, no, I've given that. Well, yeah, I do punish myself all the time, but well, I think sometimes I could say you overdid it. You just overworked it, and then I take things out, and that happens a lot, a whole lot, and. You end up, sometimes you just love this little part of your painting, another little part of your painting, and you got so many little places that you love, but you can't have them all, because then none of them stand out. So it's hard sometimes to paint out a part that you really liked a lot, or so, but you can't, it just doesn't work if it's all intense. So gotta have places for your eye to rest, or just breathe, or something, just a feeling. Jazz is a big one. I really, I was thinking hard about that because I really love a lot of kinds of music. And I probably just put on a Pandora station that I like and let it waft around. And in the very beginning of Pandora, I was always liking this, not liking that, so my playlist would kind of evolve. Sometimes I go back to the music I loved when I was, 20 years old and play that. And sometimes, yeah, I've had a lot of frustrating times in life, not just the painting, but that can be frustrating too. And changing the music to feel happier helps a lot. Or sometimes you're listening to beautiful, soft, classical music and it's pretty, but I'm getting bored. It's I gotta change something. Even disco once in a while, I just change it, change how it feels. Led Zeppelin, or that sort of thing. Sometimes, I get crazy, a little crazy. Used to get crazier, but I can't keep up with myself.
Do you have a time of the day you like to work better than others?
Late afternoon, early evening. When I was younger, I'd love to do things late at night, drink and paint till 1 o'clock in the morning, but not so much anymore.
So,
I did that more with the clothing. I'd stay in Mount Adams and just hang out in my space and paint, and because you'd be alone, and you could just get a lot done. And create. That's when I would start painting paintings just for the heck of it, too.
you work pretty large. I mean, some of these are 65 by 65 or bigger. The smallest one is like
Probably
30
that
by 30.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not tiny little paintings. So, what's the difference for you working small, which that's like a 24 by 36 versus a 5 foot by 7 foot piece?
I just have a lot more freedom of movement, and I like to feel like I'm not just painting like this. I use my body, and I've learned so much from workshops and painting with other people. And sometimes, you just always learn something, even if you're working with people that have never painted before or very new at it. There's just some little thing like about a material or some different aspect or approach. And then sometimes the instructors might have a way of painting that influences you. I don't try to copy it, but some of those movements, I remember doing a workshop with this one woman where everything looked like she was jousting. And we paint with a long paintbrush, and I started putting really long handles on some of my brushes so I could stand way back and make marks. Because if you're making even a fluid mark where it's kind of a circle, but if you're making it randomly, it isn't like a perfect circle. You don't want it to be. It's part of a feeling. And one day I was doing some little pieces with a very long brush, and this woman looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" Because I was barely touching it. And I just, out of nowhere, said, "I'm kissing the painting." But I don't know where that came from. I thought, I like that. That is where the feeling gets. And I think when I paint in a group of people, everybody's excited about what they're doing. And the energy of it and the camaraderie is really kind of multiplies your feelings, the strength of it all. And I can go away from that experience, and I've been uplifted, and I can continue to paint and go off in that direction. I'm going to a workshop in October in Santa Fe, and now that I'm at the stage I'm in life, I thought, those are my experiences of travel. You can travel by yourself, and you meet up with other people that are doing something you like to do, you know, and in a beautiful place. What a better way to go. I'm trying to think. Sometimes the last marks are white or something very light to kind of pop out from the whole piece, that it just kind of gives it a little pop. But you know, it's always working in, working out. Balance changing, balance changing.
What do you do when you find yourself sort of in a stuck place or a fallow place? Do you ever have that happen to you? Or am I just
A lot.
speaking for myself?
Oh, no, a lot. And almost any artist that I've ever talked to says that. That they have their down times and they feel like, and self-doubt and all the time. I just think, oh my God, what am I doing? This is terrible. I hate this. Oh, you know. And then having personal problems and issues that happen that just prevent you from being there, and your energy is so low, you just, for me anyway, just can't even do it. And sometimes it's okay, just give yourself permission to not do it. I think that if I just go to the studio and maybe not do anything and just be there, that eventually it just starts kind of feeling like something. But the best thing is when, like I said, being with other people, it kind of gets my energy moving again. Or even just going to other shows or to museums and looking at things. And every time I go anywhere and see art, I'm always, you know, amazed by something or learn something just from observation. And it's kind of saying, I wonder how they did that. And the more I paint, the more I can figure it out. When I remember very beginning thinking, abstract, I just got a feeling for it, I know I can do it. First thing I tried to do was like, oh my God, this is hard. Because you don't even know if the paint is going to be opaque or thick or transparent, and how do you make it look like that? How do you make it not run, or run if you want it to? So you learn, you just figure it out, mostly.
Do you ever think about what you want people to get out of your paintings, but you want somebody to take away from it? You know, or do you just, that's up to the viewer?
Well, you know, I like it when people, first I used to not like it when people would look at my painting and say, oh, I see a monkey and I see, you know, there's a bunny and there's this and there's that. Oh God, you know, oh my God, what the heck. And then I decided to embrace that. It's cool, you know, like if somebody wants to see that and it makes them feel good and they like it, great. So, and learning along the way of talking to other artists that, you know, knew more than I do for sure, and I still know I've got plenty to go and learning some more stuff. But I guess if it makes somebody happy or they feel something from it, that makes me happy. It does make me feel happy when it's appreciated in some way, even if it's not purchased. It just feels good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what my agenda is really. When you say what drives you as an artist, I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, really, I don't. I like challenges, I said that. And actually, at a certain point, I felt like, oh, maybe I'm done with this. Because I was very depressed and thinking blah, blah, blah. And then, I don't know, just get back into it and see where it goes. I used to think I don't want to work as hard at marketing myself and all the hard stuff. I just want to make decent paintings and enjoy it. I enjoy doing it. I love painting big, and I've been painting bigger, but if you're talking to a lot of people, they'll go, yeah, but that's really hard to sell because what spaces are there? Although I think that's changing just because architecture's changing, the way people live is changing, and I sell many big paintings in Florida because everybody's buying and making these big houses with great big walls and high ceilings and all the light. They want big pieces. So that's been good. The paintings, several of the bigger paintings, all were unstretched, and then I have them stretched later. Even that one, the blue one, the bluish one right on this gray wall. That Suitors just did that for me. But with small ones, it's so much easier just to buy it already stretched. And I don't stretch it because I don't trust myself. Well, I've got a bad back too. It's like, oh, I'm not going to try to do that.
That would be a tough one to stretch by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You need at least one other person to do that well.
Yeah.
So if you were an art supply, what would you be?
If I was an art supply, that's a weird question. I don't know. I like to be a big bucket of red paint.
Okay, I love it.
Red, just today, you know.
Which red?
No, I don't use red a lot, but I think red is like to me, it's like passion. It's not anger, it's passion. And yeah, and I think that red can be angry, or it can be just passionate in a negative way or a positive way, just intense. The first painting I ever sold of consequence to Tim Mahoney of the U.S. Bank, that was, you know, the Hale Foundation, and which was a huge honor. He came to my studio, and Tamara Harkavy brought him over, and they bought a painting. And then I was painting in oil paint, and I really gave it up because it was just too hard. But I remember that my mom was calling me and bugging me, and she calls, and I'm like painting my painting, and then I talk her through, I picked up some red paint, and that was like the best part of the painting, this intense part right there. And the cool thing was, he said, "Were you angry when you painted this?" I said, "Yeah, a little." Oh, God.
So when you do, have you ever done like an unstretched canvas or anything like that and just go, I like this part of it, and chopped it off and cut it down? And
I think I'm going to do that, but nope, never
you
did
never
that.
have?
I
Okay.
might sometime.
Okay.
The first time I bought a roll of canvas and put it up on the wall, and it was, the entire roll was 10 feet and, you know, over 60 inches. And I thought, I'm just going to paint this whole big thing, and then I'll cut it into paintings. When I got it done, I thought, I don't want to. I just liked it the way it was. And eventually that went to a bank in Panama, which was really cool. Yeah, and it's just random how these things happen, really.
And you just got a new website,
Yeah,
and it looks great.
Thank
So
you.
Congratulations. I know that took a while to happen.
I asked Paul to help me with my website like three or 4 years ago. And we started.
I didn't do it. The final piece.
I know, well,
Yeah.
but it wasn't your fault. It was
No,
not your fault,
no.
it was my fault.
But is it Tom?
Tom
Tom did a good job with
Levac,
it.
and he's not totally finished, but we're getting to a good spot where it's now at least published or out there. Then in that facet, that whole week right before the show, my email didn't work, and I didn't know it. So any communication that was going on as a result of Paul's fantastic marketing skills, but it just from me changing a host or something, I don't know, it got lost.
It's a lot of work. Cedric is in the house. Howdy.
Oh, hi,
And
Cedric.
Cedric's an
Oh,
excellent marketer.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I just learned something from him today, actually, because you posted in your bio a link to the upcoming show here.
Yes.
And I was like, I never thought of that space as marketing space. And it makes total sense, and just as use of a different way to get a message out there. So thanks for teaching me that today. But you do a great job.
He does. And I tried at one time to have somebody do postings and things for me, but you're still having to do a lot of work just to make sure they have content. And then when they say things, it doesn't sound like you want it to sound. At least in my experience, it didn't. So I don't know. I'd like to find a way to get some help, but I'm not sure how to do that. Except I'd let Paul do it.
Yeah.
He's kind of busy. I'm lucky I had opportunities to do all the different things I did, and lucky that it went pretty well, because it could have not gone well. And I think my parents were very unusually creative and interesting people. You know, they were creative, not like they were doing art, but they were doing art in different ways. Like my mother our house was always different. It was beautiful, but had personality. You know, you wouldn't even say it's exactly this style, because it's kind of a natural knack for putting things together and colors. And I told her even very late in her life that I always admired the way she dressed, because she never looked like somebody that went to church in Hyde Park. And there's nothing wrong with that, or is really put together like this matches this, but she always had something on that was stand out, or it was really unique. And that was really her expression of art, I think, a lot of her life. My dad actually made some metal sculptures through his process of the industry he was in. He would take metals and solder things together, or And started getting more refined and was making some jewelry, but really interesting jewelry that was very rough and kind of like brutalist looking stuff. And some sculptures. And some of the sculptures were just accidents where the furnace blew up or something and metal went everywhere, and you picked up some of the metal after it cooled off and like, oh, this is neat.
Yeah.
There you go.
So just want to follow up on Laura's comment, with the whole host of different things you've done. And you talked about like this piece here being one of your older pieces, and talking about these pieces, and which are years apart from each other, and finding these very common mark making and your own fingerprint coming through that. So in looking back to having worked with your grandmother when you were 2 and 3 years old up until now, what are the through lines you see in that whole experience? Can you state it? I mean, it's just...
From that long ago, not really. I was just drawing pictures of, it does make me think some of the best art is when you're a kid and you're just creative and you don't know too much. That's really good abstract work. And I really do want to do some more representational abstract, or that, maybe it does look like a landscape. I've done that a little bit. And sometimes when I see things in a painting, I'm thinking, do I want to take it further and actually make that more prominent? Like, I've got a few paintings sitting around where I think, this thing looks like this crazy monster. What if I really made it look a little more like that monster? Because you see these wild things and they're really interesting. Or fantasy or something, I don't know. But I'll probably get there. It's almost like I'm afraid to do that because it's really reveals. It feels like you're really revealing more of yourself, Yeah. It's like, I also have thought the last time I was in a workshop, and for some reason it just dawned on me, like, what do I really want out of this? It's like freedom, it felt free. It felt really free to be doing what I was doing in that essence, and I was excited. And when you're excited and happy, it comes a lot easier than when I gotta go paint, Like commissions are kind of tricky.
I want to just add on to that, because I think within that joy, there's also fearlessness. Which incorporates a certain courage to just try things. You're like, I guess I'll be a bookkeeper. I guess I'll be on stage dancing and singing. I guess I'll start a real estate business. All those things take a lot of courage and fearlessness of, so.
The first real workshop I went to was in Boca, connected to the museum down there, and the title of the workshop was Abstract Painting, A Fearless Approach. And that woman said to me, or all of us, don't worry about how much paint you're using. This costs $17. Just paint like you're a millionaire. Don't, use a lot of paint. Just go. And she started painting really fast in all these different directions, and it was like, wow, because prior to that, I'm just like trying to make this shape and make this work, and it just was so much better. And to feel that and feel like, she said, it's just paper, it's just canvas, it's, just paint. You don't have to show it to anybody if you don't want to. And lots of great things come out of that. A lot of my paintings that earlier, not real early, but just for a long time, I was doing nothing but paintings in that color palette all the time, especially in Florida. And I just wanted to go somewhere else. So that painting is really the most recent painting I've done. And I started that one in that workshop in Oakland, California. Small, in somebody's garage. It was great, but only like 6 of us. And it was the one that was the hardest one to finish for whatever reason. But then I finally, it sat for a long time, and it was just on raw canvas, on pinned up to the wall. And my mom passed away, and the first time I got back into the studio after that, I finished that painting. And then it became, the layers of it became more ethereal and soft, and it felt like it's really rising, and that gets kind of like a drifting feeling at the top. So that's why I called it Gentle Goodbye.
Go for it.
No. I'll do that later. Yeah, I made this one thing that I bought some really cheap paint brushes, the chip brushes at the paint store or just the hardware store, and they're just like really kind of flimsy at the ends. It's not like a cut thick piece of brush, so that when you use it, you just get these streaky marks. And I took 3 of those, and I got a board, and I used like liquid nails, a really strong glue, and glued them to this long board. So side by side, they make this mark that is like, some of it's in that green painting, just where, not a lot of it, but where you see something, it's just these brushes. And sometimes I just use one brush, but when I take that big mark, oh, we didn't bring that one that was really most of that. But it's cool because it's like this much of a mark and you can do this big. I like to use spreaders, spatulas, even stuff from the hardware store that just makes a mark or scrapes into things. Sometimes I use my fingernails. Sometimes, that gets messy. I can't paint with gloves on. I know it's probably smart, but I just can't do it. It just doesn't feel right. And one lady that I just learned from some things, she had a feather attached to a long pole, a feather that had a lot of, I did that in the workshop, and it's apparent in that darker gray painting, mostly grays and blacks. Just this feather, flipping it around makes these really neat little, random marks that are soft and different. Fingers. Just a little bit here and there.
Well, if you were in a jazz band, what instrument would you play?
The saxophone.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Then maybe the piano. Those are my 2 favorite.
Any other questions? If not, we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
So thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Jolie.
Thanks, everybody.